What's going on, guys? Mr. Octagonal here from Octagonal Gaming, back here with a Miami Dolphins franchise video. It is a prospect profile, the first one for season number 2, and we will be looking at offensive players. The Dolphins could use a lot of help on the offensive side of the ball, and we're going to be looking at a lot of high first-round picks, as well as some other projected players, mainly because I would not be shocked if the Dolphins trade up. Starting with the quarterback position, it's been a mixed bag at that position this year for the Dolphins. Ryan Tannehill has shown some flashes, but he does lead the league in interceptions. So the first guy we're going to look at is Jake Fromm. He is my prediction to be the #1 overall pick, and for good reason. He is a phenomenal quarterback. He has the athletic traits, he has the size, he has a really solid arm, he has a strong arm, which is a scheme fit for the Dolphins, and he is pretty accurate. I expect him to be a superstar in the NFL. Another guy I expect to be a superstar, he is a winner, he has ice in his veins, and he could also project to be the #1 overall pick, or I expect him to definitely be a top 5 pick. That is Tua Tagovailoa from Alabama. Not quite as big or strong of an arm, so maybe not quite the athlete that Jake Fromm is, but Tua has the intangibles. He's better when it comes to throwing on the run. He's a little bit more mobile than Jake Fromm is. And obviously, as I mentioned before, he has ice in his veins. And someone like that for the Dolphins, a game manager, but at the same time a really good quarterback, I think that could help them a lot. And Tua Tagovailoa's favorite target at Alabama is this man right here. His name is Jerry Jeudy. He is my #1 graded receiver in this draft. There's another receiver who's really good, who we're going to look at in a second. Jeudy is not a scheme fit. He is a possession receiver. He is not the fastest, and he's not the biggest, but he runs his routes well. He has phenomenal hands, and he's a really solid player to put on the outside. I think he's going to be a phenomenal player in the NFL. And the other really good receiver, he is more of a big guy, more of a red zone threat, sort of a going upstairs where grandma hides the cookies guy. But I don't think he quite has the hands that Jerry Jeudy has. And that is D.K. Donkey Kong Metcalf from Ole Miss. Ole Miss had a wide receiver last year, A.J. Brown, who went #1 overall to the Seattle Seahawks. So Metcalf is really not that much worse than A.J. Brown and could be a top 5 or top 10 pick. As I mentioned before, he's a red zone threat. He's a big guy. He makes big plays, but he needs to work on the little things, which I think Jerry Jeudy does have. I think Metcalf has more upside than Jerry Jeudy, but also has a better chance of being a bust. Next guy we have here is from The Ohio State University, and that is running back J.K. Dobbins. The Dolphins do have Bryce Love and Kenyon Drake, but we don't know when Bryce Love is going to play again. Of course, he is protesting, and Kenyon Drake's contract is up at the end of the season, so running back is a huge question for the Dolphins, and it doesn't hurt to look at some of the running backs in this year's draft. Dobbins is not a particularly big fella. He's 5'10", but he's fast, he's quick, he's agile, he is elusive, he is very athletic, he does not fumble the ball too easily, he has a nasty juke move, he can find the holes, he has patience, and I think he could be a top 5 to 10 pick. Next up, this player is a projected mid-third rounder. I think that's really good value. I think he's a second-round talent and someone who the Dolphins could snag up from the University of Clemson. It is Travis Etienne. I hope I said that right. I'm not sure if I did. Like Dobbins, he's not the biggest, 5'10", about 200 pounds. All 4 of the running backs we're looking at today are elusive backs, which is a scheme fit for the Dolphins. Obviously, Etienne isn't quite as good as J.K. Dobbins or the other running backs we're going to be looking at, but he has a lot of talent. Obviously, the Clemson offensive line is really good, but Etienne, I guess, utilizes the offensive line and also makes a lot of plays on his own. The next player we're going to be looking at, also residing in the ACC, I almost said the AFC for some reason, in the ACC from Boston College, that is A.J. Dillon, one of the more electrifying players in college football. Dillon is 6 foot, 244 pounds, so he's a big guy. He is elusive, and he's a really big guy, so he has the power. He's taller than the other guys we've looked at. He's heavier, he's stronger, he has better trucking. He doesn't fumble the football too easily, I do think. He isn't quite as athletic as like a J.K. Dobbins or a Travis Etienne or a Jonathan Taylor, who, spoiler alert, is the next guy we're going to be looking at. Dillon is a projected early second-round pick. I think that's about good value for him, and I would not be shocked if the Dolphins do pick him up in the second round. The last guy we're going to be looking at, as I mentioned a second ago, is Jonathan Taylor out of Wisconsin. A projected late first-round pick. The Dolphins likely will not have a high second-rounder since they're not doing too bad. And I don't think it makes sense to trade up in both the first and the second round. So the Dolphins may have to get lucky with Jonathan Taylor, assuming they trade up and draft one of the players we've already mentioned. Or they could stick with their pick, which I would imagine is going to be in the 18 to 23 range. And I could see them picking up Jonathan Taylor, who's about as good as J.K. Dobbins, without giving up a lot of assets. Now we're going to be looking at the big guys of the offensive line, starting with center. Larry Mutunzo's been playing center, and he's not really a primary center, so that could create a need. That is Tyler Biadasz out of Wisconsin, like, of course, Mr. Jonathan Taylor. Without good offensive linemen, it's hard to have a good running back. If the Dolphins don't trade up, like I mentioned, Jonathan Taylor could be a pick. Another guy could be Tyler Biadasz, a projected late first-rounder. There are guys like Alan Snyder who are higher projections, but Alan Snyder is 23, which is a little bit too old for the Dolphins' liking. So someone like Biadasz or Walker Little could make a lot more sense. And speaking of Walker Little, out of Stanford, he's the last guy we're going to be looking at today. He is probably going to be in the late first, early second round range. So if the Dolphins do keep their pick or trade down, I could see him being an option, but I don't expect him to be available in the mid-second round. He is agile. He can run block. He can pass block. Both Walker and Biadasz, they're not really good at one particular skill, whether it's run blocking, pass blocking, impact blocking, but they're both very well-rounded, and I think even though they both play different positions on the offensive line, they're both the same scheme, which is agile, and I think they are pretty similar, and they have pretty similar value and talent. So that's going to do it for this prospect profile. Hope you all enjoyed. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe, and make sure to get hyped for No Nut November.
I'm a Barbie girl in the Barbie world. Loving plastic, it's fantastic. You can brush my hair, undress me everywhere. Imagination, life is your creation.
Yo, hey, man!